You put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's what the little ego identity, right? The little sense of separate personality. This is Christian, that's Michael. That's what that ego part of us is. Who we are is actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, tiny, tiny part of who we are to think that it is all who we are. And to make all these important, consequential choices from a tiny and always limited and always fear-based perspective. The only way you're going to find fulfillment, right? Well, I think anybody who's stuck out this conversation this long knows, has lived long enough to know that there isn't anybody out there who's going to make us happy in so many parts of the world, and how many things we are so blessed to have here in the US that we take for granted, that I think it would be great for all of us to be aware so we can be grateful even for the little things.
I agree.
I know self-hatred. My entire adolescence was one long depression. Like, figure out this kid, knowing he was gay, who thought he wanted to be a priest, who wanted to serve God as I understood it then, and being told by that religion in which I was raised that I was an abomination, that I was going to burn in hell for eternity. So, suicidal fantasies and all that.
What's up, fam? Before we get into this conversation, let me say this. Look, I know it's a thing, right? But if what we do here on this channel speaks to you, if it lifts you, centers you, or helps you see your life a little clearer, I invite you to like the video and subscribe so you stay connected. And if you want these conversations with you beyond YouTube, download the Thrival Journey podcast on your favorite RSS platform. It is a small ask that goes a long way, and it really, truly helps us create the kind of content that doesn't just entertain, but actually supports your journey of growth and alignment. So hit that like, subscribe. Let's breathe in, get present, step into the conversation. Mr. Christian, I want to welcome you to the Thrival Journey. We talked a little bit, but again, how are you doing?
Thank you, Michael. I'm doing pretty well, and I'm really happy to be here with you and looking forward to our conversation. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm looking forward to our conversation too, because you talk about some powerful things, transformation and things along those lines in that world. And what I want to do, I just want to go back before we get here, because I found your beginning information and your story very interesting. And so you were born in Havana, Cuba, and you and your parents fled communism. And I wanted to know, do you remember that? And if you do, like, how was that for you?
Yeah, I remember when we left Cuba, I was 10. So I lived my first 10 years of life in a communist country. And I mean, yeah, there's so much to say about that. There's so many things we take for granted here in the US. I mean, not to mention the big things like freedom, and being able to do what you choose to do and study what you choose to study, and make your own way in life, practice whatever religious or spiritual beliefs you choose to practice. But here's an example from a thing that's it's a simple thing, but it tells a lot. Like, what's chewing gum to us here in the U.S. or in developed countries? It's nothing, right? We stick a stick of gum in our mouth and we spit it out, and without even having a second thought about it. Mm-hmm. We had it better than most in Cuba because my parents had several friends who worked for foreign embassies. So a few times a year they would get, treats like chewing gum. Remember the little chiclets packs?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So we used to get a couple of those and split it between the kids. I'm one of many kids. And we'd chew that piece of gum. At the end of the day, we'd get a glass of water, with a little bit of water, put toothpaste in it and stick our gum in there so it'd be minty the next day, and keep it going for 2-3 weeks until my mom found it and threw it out. So we'd have to hide it. But it just goes to show how it is in so many parts of the world, and how many things we are so blessed to have here in the US that we take for granted, that I think it would be great for all of us to be aware so we can be grateful even for the little things.
I agree. Well, wait a minute. So I want to get the essence of this. You didn't get gum because why?
Because it wasn't available. It was not to be had.
And the people, the friends that you had, that your parents had, they would bring you the gum, and then you'll be able to enjoy the simple things in life, bubblegum or chiclets or whatever.
I mean, in that regime and those type of countries, you have like like you're allotted, you have this little book and you're allotted so many loaves of bread or so many gallons of milk according to how many people in the family. But most of the time you go to the store and the stores are bare. There's nothing. So no matter how much you're allotted, there's not the stuff. It's not like here where you go to the grocery store. And I remember the first time I went to a grocery store in Spain, because we left through Spain first. It was just overwhelming, the number of choices.
Hmm.
Uh, Even, toothpaste,
Hmm.
shampoo, like it's like an overwhelming number of choices.
Do you think that just growing up with those years, those formative years, did that give you some kind of mindset in life?
Yeah. I mean, that, appreciating more the little things and not taking things for granted. The other thing for which I'm really grateful is that, we had a TV, but there was nothing worth watching. It's like
Mhm.
literally old black and white movies, for American movies, um, and government propaganda. So we grew up reading, and I'm really grateful for that. I
Yeah.
developed a lifelong love affair with words and with books because of that. And
Hmm.
I think that deepened and expanded the way that I look at the human experience.
Yeah.
And also, we had to invent our own games. Like, there were no toys, or very
Yeah.
few toys to be had. So we had to be creative, and we spent a lot of time playing outside and inventing our pastimes. And that, I think, is like when I see my nieces and nephews, with their head stuck in a phone or TV screen, and like it saddens me.
Yeah, when you were saying that, I was remembering, like, in my childhood, 80s, growing up, like we would make up games and play games, and we're all outside during the snow. I'm from Michigan. And, it was just, these are moments that late, like now in these years, that I think about. And it also helped me create, my creativity. And when I look at, my nephews and nieces, and they're like in the other room now, just playing video games. Like, go outside, like, get out. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We
So
used to we used to put on shows and plays and
yeah,
performances.
all the fun things,
Yeah.
and it's different now. But I try to encourage them to, go outside, play football, do whatever you want to do, just get out, and get out of the TikToks and all that good stuff. But it has its place, but not all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Of course, it has its place, but it's interesting because the technology has allowed us to interconnect in some ways globally, but at what level, right? In
yeah,
some ways, we feel more isolated and alone than ever,
yeah.
because we're all in our unique little worlds, with watching our TikToks or Instagram, or just following, texting people. So
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
it's a mixed blessing, the mixed
It is a
bag.
mixed blessing. Yeah, I totally agree. Um, so coming from that world, traveling, you said through Spain, which is a beautiful country,
Yeah.
and then end up here. Like, what was the mindset when you got to America? Once you had all the bounty and the freedoms and as much chiclet as you wanted to get.
Well, it was a shock. For one thing, I just didn't speak a word of English.
Hmm.
And when we first landed, we went to a small town in rural Georgia, in the middle of Georgia, that was famous for a couple of things. One of which was it had one of the three largest psychiatric hospitals in the world, and my dad was a psychiatrist. But as you can imagine, in those days, I don't know now, but that they didn't take very kindly to foreigners,
Hmm.
and there are very very clear racial divisions, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, so I don't have very fun memories. As soon as we could get out of there, we went back to Miami, where there was much more of a, at least, openness to Latino, Spanish speaking communities.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine that's just being tough, coming from a different, just world, basically,
Yeah.
entering this world and then having to deal with, being free, but then also dealing with, those psychological things that you have to deal with during that time. But
Yeah.
you began to, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just saying, yes, it was not easy at all.
Yeah. So you began on this journey. You're here. You talked about your late 20s. Um, Things were happening for you. Can you just talk about that world for a minute?
Yeah, by the end of my 20s, I was pretty, I was doing pretty well for myself. I was working in community relations for a psychiatric and addictions hospital. Had a nice kind of cushy job. Um, I got to wine and dine potential referral sources for the hospital. Um, and I had developed enough of a network that I didn't have to work very hard for that. Um, and yet it seemed to me that the more that I had, I was sought after socially, sought after professionally, and yet the more that I had, the more that it felt like there's something missing. There has to be more to life,
Hmm.
and that started a process of me turning inward. And while I had struggled with the religion in which I was raised, which was Catholicism, because it was so strict and dogmatic and didn't have room for me, um, I started looking eastward. So I started looking at Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism and some of those indigenous traditions, um, and pretty soon, I quit my job and sold my condo and um, gave away most of my belongings and went off on a spiritual journey and never looked back. That was the last job that I ever had that I worked for somebody else, other than working for myself.
You talked about you had all these things on the outside, but you were unfulfilled, and you made a shift. Was there like a moment that said, you know what, this is just enough, and I need to figure out what's going on with me on the inside?
Well, I think it connects to, I think it was an accumulation
Hmm.
of things and a buildup that happened. But I love the concept that you teach and practice, which is thriving. I wasn't thriving.
Hmm.
I was living, and I had a pretty comfy and in some ways very enviable life, but I didn't
Hmm.
feel like I was thriving. Like many of us, I was kind of selling out for that illusion of security of a biweekly paycheck.
Hmm.
But what happened too is that around that time is when the insurance company started tightening the screws. So I started to see practices taken on at the hospital in which I worked, like people being put inpatient and their benefits utilized just because they had the benefits when they might have been okay doing outpatient service. So
Yeah.
everything became much more money and bottom line oriented, and I got disillusioned, and that's one of the things that triggered my searching. And there has to be more to life. So it's a combination of that disillusionment and the realization that external validation, whether through being sought after socially or professionally or having stuff, like none of that was enough for me,
Yeah.
and that's what prompted that search.
So there was a disconnect, and like you said, you were just surviving. And then you talked about disillusionment. I think a lot of people live in the world of illusion, and they don't connect to the what's so in their life. And it seems like that's what you did. So what was the next thing that you did once you begin, like, I guess, open up?
Well, I mean, the beginning was that dramatic leap, where I just quit everything and went off on a spiritual journey. I was part of a very small spiritual community. I studied with a spiritual teacher for about 5 years, and blending Eastern and Western principles, psychology, spirituality, and pretty soon, I did it for about 4 or 5 years, and then went off on my own. And I've been applying, those principles and started teaching. I learned about breathwork through that teacher. I learned about meditation, and I weave those practices into my retreats and my coaching, and it was that's what had been missing for me, because I had
Hmm.
developed so much mentally, psychologically, professionally, but I had neglected the spiritual. Like many people, I threw out the baby with a baptismal water. Uh,
Yeah.
and and then realizes, like, wait a minute, it's just as ludicrous to try to reject one part of being human, like sexuality, like my religion had tried to get me to do, as it is to reject my spiritual nature. It's all part of that whole human being, and when we reject any part of our wholeness, there's no way that we can thrive.
Hmm. Hmm. I was going to go another way, but you said that. We reject a part of our wholeness. Can you talk about that? Like, because I think that that's maybe a struggle for people, and I know we're going to talk about entrepreneurs and things like that, but this may intersect with that. But when you reject a part of your wholeness,
Yeah,
can
like
you just
in
talk
my
about
case, it
that?
was those two things. Like, I mean, first of all, I knew from a young age that I was gay, and the religion in which I was raised had no room for that.
Okay.
So I tried to reject that part of myself for some time, and then when I realized, how when I made the choice that I wasn't going to live my life based on teachings culture that were taken out of their cultural and historical context, teachings from thousands of years ago, um, that were translated and retranslated and mistranslated, teachings that were, that came about when women weren't even equal, women were property.
Hmm.
So I decided, no, I'm not going to base my choices about what I'm going to do with my life and what's right and what's wrong on that. And so that triggered, that was the bathwater, but I threw out the good part of the spirituality. I just rejected the whole thing.
Hmm.
Anything that had to smack of spirituality or religion, I didn't know the difference between those two things back then. So I rejected that in my 20s. And at the end of my 20s is when I started to realize, wait a minute, there's something missing.
Hmm.
And that was that other part of my being human, of my wholeness, that I had ignored, and tried to reject and run away from in my 20s. And so my choice then was to begin to reincorporate that, and to find ways of connecting with that and expressing it that were a match for me, that worked for me.
Yeah. The question I have then is, what was the impact on the rejection of you? Because it could be different for everybody. It could be this, what you experienced, but there's an impact there. What was that impact for you?
Of my having been rejected by
Yeah.
religion.
Yes. Or just any parts of you,
Oh,
period.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, going back to wholeness and thriving, we can't be thriving if we're rejecting any part of who we are. In my case, whether it was sexuality or spirituality, it's like ludicrous to try to suppress, repress, ignore, jump over parts of who we are. It's just like, another thing that we see often, which is, spiritual bypassing.
Mm,
I don't want to look at the dark stuff. I don't want to look at the painful stuff. I just want to focus on the quote unquote love and light, and that stuff that we're trying to run away from, that we're trying to repress or stick in the back of the drawer or a closet somewhere. It's not going to go away,
hmm.
right? Or the painful stuff. It's not going to go away. It's only going to fester under the surface and impact our relationships and the quality of our lives from the subconscious.
Yeah.
So it's not easy work. It's hard work. I know, but it's infinitely rewarding, because once
Yeah.
we are able to look at that and ask the hard questions, why am I triggered by that? Why do I keep recreating this pattern in relationship? Why do I
Hmm.
keep having the same old boring argument, only with a different actor, a different co-lead? But it's the same crap coming up. At some point, we have to get honest and real and say, wait a minute, there's one common denominator in every one of those arguments, in every one of those relationships, and it's right here. Why?
Yeah.
Why is that? And once we ask those hard questions, we can do something about it, right? We can
Yeah.
heal whatever needs to be healed. We can make whatever choices we need to make.
Hmm. Getting honest with that part of you that you won't face, um, and really just going at it.
Yeah.
Just go at it.
Yeah.
So you started to develop this for yourself, and you went on a spiritual journey. What was that like, and what did you do? And I asked that question because I've had a couple of people that have done the same. Like they talk about they're more spiritual, in their quest, and um, they went tried ayahuasca and all that good stuff. And now it's not the same for everybody, but they also talk about breath work. And so that's the core of my question is, what was that journey, and how did breath work help you to get to the next space in your life?
Let me start with the breathwork. The journey itself was difficult, right? Because it entailed questioning things that I've taken for granted all my life, things that I've been told, things that I was conditioned to believe. When I was raised, there was one only true religion in the world, and that was the Roman Catholic Church. And
Mm-hmm.
so it became a process of questioning, right? And investigating and having my own experiences and beginning to explore and develop my own personal relationship with the sacred, whatever you call that. And so there was a lot of years of explanation. Breathwork was life changing. Like I'll never forget the very first session, because after so much searching and so much looking, I got a glimpse of an aspect of myself, like the part of us that, call it the soul, call it, I talk about the baseball and the stadium metaphor. If you put a baseball in the center of a stadium, that's what the little ego identity, right? The little sense of separate personality. This is Christian, that's Michael. That's what that ego part of us is. Who
Mm-hmm.
we are is actually the stadium. And we've allowed this tiny, tiny, tiny part of who we are to think that it is all who we are, and to make all these important consequential choices from its tiny and always limited and always fear-based perspective. So part of what breathwork did for me, and I know that like sacred medicine journeys also do it for people because I hear it all the time. Um, People who do breathwork with me, and then they'll say, "Wow, I got to the same place," which to me is that stadium nature, um, in breathwork that I did on an ayahuasca journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's a different pathway,
Yeah.
a different way to get to those experiences. And once you have an experience of yourself, one thing's reading about it. Another one is having an experience of yourself as that, as interconnected to it all, as free in the ultimate sense of freedom, um, empowered in a soulful kind of way, because it's both incredibly empowering and profoundly humbling at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. And so once you have a taste of that, everything changes.
Everything changes. And so, talking to this person now, this Christian now, you talk about some extraordinary things that we'll talk about. Um, and you use breath work in your retreats and things like that. You stated. You talk about personal power, your true personal power. How do you define that?
And that's a deep question too, because most of us struggle with that word, right? Power. Because also we've been conditioned to think that power is bad,
Hmm.
with quotes like power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And what good person wants to be corrupted? And then how many times have we witnessed abuses of power, whether in our personal relationships with parental figures and teachers, etc., bosses, and in the world? Like all we have to do is turn on the news on any given day and
Right,
see
right.
witness at least one abuse of power. So when you put all that together, what happens tragically is that we get confused about power. And so we end up rejecting power.
Mm,
And what happens when we do that, because we weren't taught that those words, like those power corrupts phrase, Lord Acton, who spoke them, was specifically speaking about political power, not the personal power that we're talking about. But we weren't taught that. So we throw again the baby out with the bathwater. And what happens when we give away our power is that we end up settling. How many times have we said yes when inside it was a no? Inside we were not okay with that. But in order to maintain the peace, because we're so terrified of the emotions and conflict, uh, that we end up settling for that illusion of pseudo peace, and we settle for crumbs of
mhm.
pseudo acceptance and pseudo love. And it's not a good strategy, because all that stuff that we're suppressing, that's going to turn into resentment,
Yeah,
because it has to,
yeah.
right? Every time that we're suppressing our dreams, um, giving away our power, we're putting other people's preferences and perceptions and beliefs ahead of ours. That stuff, it's we're gonna inside is gonna turn into resentment. And I'm not and I'm of course there's compromise in every relationship, of course. So that's
Mhm.
not what I'm talking about. It's like tonight we want to go for Chinese, tomorrow we go for Mexican. That's different from what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm talking about sacrificing, abandoning ourselves at the deepest levels in order to settle because we're afraid of being alone or because we're afraid of having a difficult conversation.
Right. So you talk about possibly abandoning. How does one reclaim their power then if they're afraid of it or they're not really embracing it, their personal
Yeah,
power?
yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, understanding what we're doing, right? So beginning to understand our relationship to power, and that there are different kinds of power, and that we can step into a kind of personal power that is not hierarchical, that is not abusive, that doesn't require that we push anybody down, step on them, put our knee to their neck in order to prop ourselves up and feel powerful. That there's a
Mhm.
way that we can manage our relationship to power that is not zero sum, right? So that your
Right.
power, your having power, doesn't take away from mine. Of course not. And so that we begin to move more into the direction what I call soulful power, but it's more like power with rather than power over.
Mhm.
And so that's, and then beginning to pay attention, right? We can't do anything about what we can't see. So going through life, paying attention. What are those times when we stuff ourselves, when we play small, when we know the answer in a meeting, but we're afraid to raise the hand and speak up? Or
Yeah.
yeah, or because because whatever, we feel rejection, we want to make sense with everybody else, we're afraid of, like, if we really be all of who we are, that other people might not be able to handle it and reject it, so we play small and we stick ourselves into a little box, and that's not of that's the opposite of thriving.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
like playing small and acting as if. And we've also been conditioned to believe that to let ourselves shine, to let ourselves thrive, is arrogance. And I think it's the reverse. How dare we hide our light under a bushel? How dare we play small, particularly at this time, um, when everything is raining
Mhm.
on like we're all in this together. Like we're a make it or break it point in terms of human evolution. Like the planet will
Mhm.
be fine, right?
Mhm.
The mess that we have made, the planet left on its own will find balance again. Might take a gazillion years. It might end up being an enlightened cockroach planet in the end. Whether we make it, right? We're just now beginning to
I'm sorry you
unleash.
said like cockroach, but you're that's a fact.
Yeah. Whether
Right.
we make it, that's what's up, right? We're just now beginning to experience what we have unleashed on our environment.
Yeah.
So it's time. It's like all hands on deck. If anybody who's listening or watching this who has the slightest inkling of suspicion that they have work to do, as
Yeah.
teachers, as healers, as activists for change, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the clarion call. All hands on deck.
I remember that. The cockroach statement kind of threw me off a little bit, but because I started picturing, conscious
Meditating
cockroaches.
cockroaches.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. um, let's see. Let me get back on track here. So I was going to say, I've been through man, years of my transformation, and once you're transformed, but there's always transformation happening. Especially, what I like to say is that I stay in the conversation of transformation with people, just because you can always have a steadily moving world of transformation. And these days, that I'm so much further along than I was, but I'm still at a place where I know there's so much more to do and to grow. And you're talking about playing small. And it just reminded me of, for whatever reasons, I mean, I know the reasons, I just don't want to go into it right now because it's like a therapy session. But I was playing small, even though like I was successful in areas, and that playing small mindset really got me to play small in life. And then, things like my world mirrored what was going on the inside. And if that's happening to people that are listening, what can they do to really shift that for themselves if they're in that mindset of or that space or being playing small? Ladies, check this out because you're going to like what I'm about to say. And fellas, let's talk about it. Energy, your energy. the kind that fuels your focus, your drive, and your confidence in every area of life. So when I started using the Ooh Shaman Male Potency Elixir, created by my brother Celestino Cornell, I noticed something shift. My clarity sharpened, my stamina rose, my focus locked in, and whether I'm training, creating, or pouring into my purpose, I just feel alive. And here's the thing, this isn't about hype or shortcuts, it's about alignment. You know, when your body, your mind, and your spirit are connected, you move through the world differently, right? You lead differently, and you definitely love differently. So that's what this elixir was designed for, to support blood flow, endurance, and presence, so you can show up stronger, centered, and in flow every single day. So if you're ready to recharge your energy, restore your balance, and reclaim your power, go to ooshaman.com/elixir to use code ThriveWell for 10% off your order. That's ooshaman.com/elixir. Step into your sacred strength today. The link and the code is in the show notes. Check it out.
Well, the short answer is cut it out. Like,
Wait it
cut
out.
the crap out. Just
Right.
cut it out.
That's what I had to do. I had to stop.
Seriously, stop. How dare you?
Yeah.
How dare you? It's like, we need you now. We need
Yeah.
all of us. And if you want to be fulfilled, that's
Mm-hmm.
the only way you're going to find fulfillment, right? Well, I think anybody who's stuck out this conversation this long has lived long enough to know that there isn't anybody out there who's going to make us happy.
Yeah.
So no relationship is ever going to fulfill us, and it's not their job to. Like, how
Right.
unfair to put the responsibility on someone. You are going to make me happy. Yikes.
Yeah.
And we all know, like, how many more proof do we need for people who have all the money, the celebrities, the politicians, all the power you could want, and they're miserable and
Mm-hmm.
and thin-skinned.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, that the slightest comments turns them into a whole overreactive, childish tantrum without mentioning names. Uh, and so,
Okay. Yeah. I'm trying to be serious, but you say some things that are really that hit at the mark, right? You hit the mark and it resonates. So I get what you're saying. That's what I'm saying.
yeah. So the only thing, as far as I'm concerned, the only thing that is ever going to fulfill us is giving expression to that unique human potential
Mm-hmm.
that lies inside each one of us. There isn't anyone else in this universe, or any other universe for that matter, who has the same genetics, the same set of experiences, the same desires, preferences, dreams that make each one of us unique.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't give expression to that, ain't nobody else going to do it. And to me, that is the universal imperative, is to give expression to that, and we get to do that however we wish,
Yeah.
right? But going for that personal best, that personal excellence, is what's going to give us that sense of satisfaction. And it doesn't matter the details, the specifics are secondary, right? Where in one case, it could be writing an Oscar-winning screenplay. Somebody else's case might be making the best damn chocolate brownies this side of the Mississippi. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter. What matters is that we give expression to that,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where our fulfillment lies, and that's when we're going to thrive.
That's where you thrive. Expression to the unique human potential.
Yeah.
That's powerful. You know, like being self-expressed is probably one of the best things that human could be for themselves. And I know just for me that it works for me, right? Because there's moments when I'm like, not expressive, and that I'm just kind of within, but that doesn't work for me. And then I don't feel free. I don't feel like I
Right.
can achieve the things or goals or the things that I'm setting out for myself. And when I get self-expressed, it's a whole different outcome and a whole different world that shows up for me. And
Yes,
like you said,
exactly.
if you stuck it out this far in this conversation, that's one of the most powerful things that you can take away is expression to the unique human potential, which is to yourself.
Yes,
And
and let me clarify, Michael, just in case anybody's wondering or projecting. Oh wow, well, Michael and Christian, they're different. It's like, wait a minute, no, slow down, because I know self-doubt, I
yeah,
know self-hatred. My entire adolescence was one long depression. Like, figure out this
mhm,
this kid, knowing he was gay, who thought he wanted to be a priest, who wanted to serve God, as I understood it then, and being told by that religion in which I was raised that I was an abomination, that I was gonna burn in hell for eternity. So suicidal fantasies and all that. So I know if flash forward to today, never ever ever do I feel self-doubt. Like, no
Mm-hmm.
matter the circumstances, whether a relationship works out or it doesn't, whether a project succeeds or it fails, in quotes, never ever ever do I question my sense of self. My self-worth is unshakable, and I know if that can happen in me, that can happen in anybody. And yeah, it's going to take work. You have to go within and figure out who you are and ask and face yourself, and do whatever healing work you need to do to free yourself.
Yeah. That's probably the first step of really, if you're in the world of survival, which, it's common, and you are looking at, how do I thrive, or how do I get into that world of thriving? I was going to say thrival, but I don't think it's a word, but it shows
Oh,
up
but I
somewhere.
love that. Maybe it should be a word. I love
Maybe
that.
it should be
Thrival.
right.
Man, Michael, I think you just coined a great word.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. Making that the first step is really going within and just really checking yourself, to make that next step. And so, you are TEDx stage. You're a TEDx talker.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
Well, and that's to that same point. Like, as a teenager, I was painfully shy. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
was okay one on one, but if you added a third human, clammed up.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking in public in front of a group, forget it. Not gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew, and yet I knew that in order to express myself, in order to have a chance at thriving and fulfilling that human potential that we were talking about, I knew I had to get over it. I had to get over that fear.
Yeah.
Um, and managed to get through college without speaking in public. But then I said, right, I got to do something about this. So I signed up for a public speaking course. Hated it
Really?
because for 14 weeks on Thursday nights, I had to get up and give 3 2-minute speeches. Come Monday, I was already dreading it.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened? After doing it and doing it again and doing it again 3 times a week for 14 weeks, it stopped being such a big deal. So I didn't know about this then, but there's a concept that I learned later, which is from a book titled, by Susan Jeffers, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And here it is in 30 seconds. Imagine a series of concentric circles. So this
Mm-hmm.
center circle, that represents our comfort zone. This is
Mm-hmm.
where we're comfortable now being in the world, being with each other, relating to others. Every time we take a little step and push beyond that comfort zone, we're stretching out that comfort zone. So if we would take that on, it doesn't have to be 3 times a week on Thursdays. But if we would make the commitment that every week we're going to do something, one thing that's going to push us out of that comfort zone. And it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be huge. It could be a huge step, but it could be a little thing like saying yes and going on a coffee date, or saying yes. You know what? I am going to put my application for that job that just came up in my company. Every time even if we don't get the job, or even if the coffee date doesn't turn into anything, just by that act of
Mm-hmm.
pushing out and pushing out, we're pushing out our comfort zone. And that's irreversible. By the end of
Mm-hmm.
52 weeks, we're going to be way out here.
Yeah. Irreversible. Yeah, I like that word. I was just thinking, connecting what you're talking about to what I have to do in my business, which is a part of it is sales. And I had it that I hated sales. This just occurred to me.
Yeah.
How it occurs to me is that, it's just a thing that I just don't like doing. But I had to shift my thought and mine, just the way I was being about it, and saying, you know what, I do. Like, people are looking for answers, and I have an answer for you.
Yeah.
And just go into those conversations with authenticity and really listening for what they're looking for. And if I can serve them and support them, then I'll do that. So when I have to get on a phone call and all that kind of good stuff, like, that's me opening opening up, because, man, I'm telling you, I hated it. And it's still a thing that I'm still building.
I still resist that too. I get it. My heart goes. I feel you, man. I feel you.
Yeah.
And yet you've got the right reframing, right? It's like, how dare you, how dare us withhold the services, the wisdom, the skills, the practices, the programs that we have developed that we know without a shadow of a doubt can make a difference in somebody else's life.
Yes.
How dare
Yeah.
we allow our fear, our judgment about sales, or our resistance to doing that get in the way of that for somebody else?
Hmm. Yeah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And what I thought was interesting, I was looking at your information, and you have a book. Is it Conscious Love and Relationship Healing?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, just to take it romantic for a little bit, and we're talking about like how we relate to ourselves and others, and purpose and things like that. And you talk about relationship, our relationship to relationships.
yeah,
Can you talk about that concept right there?
yeah. So part of what I did in the book, which is called Conscious Love, transforming our relationship to relationships, is about shifting the way that we approach relationships. Because if here to use one example, I use 10 different ways in which we get stuck in relationship, that we have relationships crap come up. The first one is basic, right? Is if we're approaching the relationship hoping, dreaming that it's going to complete us, that it's going to make us happy, forget it,
Mm,
right? Like we were saying, so those relationships are not going to work.
hmm.
And like we were talking about before, it's not fair to put that heavy responsibility on a relationship or another person, right? I've got so much banking in this. My validation of my worth, my happiness as a human being, my possibility to thrive in life all depends on you and this relationship. Yikes. It's a
Yeah.
big responsibility. So approaching a relationship consciously means that we know that only we are going to have the capacity to fulfill ourselves,
Mm,
that and that we don't need any external validation, right? That our worth is inherent and doesn't need to be proven. Like, it's there. What the work is to clear the crap that's gotten in the way of that, all the
mm,
conditioning, all the misunderstandings that we picked up along the way from childhood. Right? We misheard something, or maybe a parent or a teacher said something to us the wrong way because they were in a moment of overwhelm. I didn't know how to do it right. Right? So we took it on as truth. Oh my God, I'm too much of this. Oh my God, I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm whatever, right? All the misunderstandings that we took on. And just because that was said or we heard it that way doesn't make it true. It doesn't make it real. So that's part of the process of freeing ourselves, is questioning all those beliefs that we have about ourselves. And
yeah.
in some cases, like, getting clear, because a lot of that stuff we suppressed
Mm,
and repressed. It was too much to handle.
hmm.
Right. So if we took on a belief like I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy of love as a kid, it's like, wow, that's a lot for a little young mind to handle. So we suppress it. But just
Yeah.
because we suppress it, it doesn't go away. That belief has been working and impacting every one of our relationships from the get go, because we end up settling. Right. That's another ways
Right.
in which we get in problem with relationship. We settle.
Yeah.
Like, we know this is not a good match. It doesn't mean we're better than it. Doesn't mean we're worse than. We just know it's not a good match, but we override the red flags, right? Or we think, oh, I can rescue them. I can fix them. And then we override all those red flags. And how does that work out? It never works out,
It doesn't.
ever. It can't.
Yeah.
Um, but it begins from that misunderstanding of devaluing ourselves, of not really seeing our own worth.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that happen in our older years that may have caused that, is because of things that we misinterpreted or misunderstood, or what we thought was happening in our younger years. When you were saying that, I was remembering a story, or not a story, but a moment when I was in middle school, and a teacher, and this is, back when we used to have a home economics, and I don't know if they still have it, but I doubt it. But anyway, I remember her name. I ain't gonna say it. I don't know if she's around anymore, but she called me lazy. She said, "You're just lazy."
Right.
And for some reason that stuck with me. And even if I forgot about it, like that was a thing that stuck with me for so long. And probably until like maybe 4 years ago. I was in a conversation with somebody else, and she had to just bring me back to that moment. And she was like, "You're loved, you're appreciated, you're not late." She didn't say you're not lazy, but she gave me all the great attributes of who I was. But though the moments like that really ran my
Yeah,
relationships with people and my life.
that's exactly right. That's a beautiful example of things that somebody said. Either with maybe they had good intentions. Maybe her intention was like, if we're gonna be generous, maybe she was trying to get you to work more in school. But to label it lazy and to tell a kid that is so not right. That's wrong,
Yeah,
right? But rather
it
than
is.
understanding what's going on with him,
Mhm.
maybe he's having trouble at home, maybe he's not getting enough sleep, maybe whatever, not enough food, maybe he doesn't have support to do his homework, whatever it is. There could be a 20, 30, 40, 50 reasons why he wasn't doing the homework.
Right.
And to label it lazy is just not. I hope that teachers aren't doing that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, I hope not. But yeah, it is so crazy because years later, here I am talking about it still. Even it doesn't affect me the same way because I've done the work, and I'm okay. I know who I am, and
Good.
lazy ain't it.
Good.
Lazy
Yeah, of course not.
ain't it.
We wouldn't be having this conversation here, and you wouldn't be producing a podcast if you were.
Not
Um,
even because this is a lot of work.
Dyslexia. Dyslexia is another one. I know friends who were dyslexic coming up, and the teachers told them all sorts of negative crap.
Yeah,
It had
yeah,
nothing to do with their ability to read or their wanting to read or lack of interest. It's just they saw things in a different way.
yeah. Right. I was just listening to someone I can't remember, but they were talking about their dyslexia. See, I can't even say it, and how it really affected them. But their mom knew that he was dyslexic, but didn't tell him until he found out. Like, I don't know, a note or whatever it was. But she didn't tell him because she didn't want him to use that as a crutch.
Right.
And I think that was good, but I think that's also like kind of like the pushing it down kind of thing and not really facing it and
I'm with
dealing with
you.
it.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
I
and it's
I would say
unhealthy.
give the kid whatever information he needs to know about himself,
And
right?
know about
Or
himself.
herself. Trust the kid to handle it.
Yeah, trust them to handle it. And I was looking, okay, again, notes here. You were talking about love, love unconsciously. How do you how does someone in the relationship, like when they get, well, first of all that, those stories and all that kind of stuff that you were talking about, like how do they get all that stuff out of the way?
Well, I mean, the first step is becoming aware of it,
Yeah.
right? Like you having that awareness about that story about having been called lazy and the way that had stuck in your head. Like from in many cases, I see it come up in breathwork all the time because
Hmm.
breathwork kind of clears the stuff that's been suppressed, and I see it happen all the time. And talking about people who are successful professionally, who are, incredibly doing incredibly well financially in the eyes of the world, and yet deep down inside, and they're still struggling with relationships.
Hmm.
Right? Why is that? Why is that the area that people who've done spiritual practice, who meditate, they still struggle with relationships? So, and part of the reason is because we have so much relational crap that we've taken on, so many unconscious beliefs about
Hmm.
ourselves, about love. Um, we have so many wounds that we haven't done the work of healing, and so all we carry all that unhealed past into our present relationships.
Hmm.
And if we're not self-aware, then we start projecting that stuff on one another and throwing it on each other's lap.
Hmm.
Um, and that's another one of the reasons that we get into trouble with relationships. That's another one of the 10. So
Yeah.
how do we do it? First step is become aware, right?
Hmm.
Ask yourself the hard questions. Start looking at patterns. Um, Use other humans as mirrors, right? We all have blind spots. So there's
Hmm.
parts of us that we're never going to see. But if you're in a relationship, and this could be any relationship, it could be a sibling, could be a coworker, whatever they do, The more that whatever they do gets us, triggers us, pisses us off, the clearer the sign is that we're doing that in some other way.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's there, it's here. And the details could be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. Some years ago, I was dating somebody. I started dating somebody, and all of a sudden, started not showing up. Like no, didn't show up for dates. No emails, no texts, no calls, nothing. I didn't get it, right? Because I was like focused over there. What's going on with him? Called him at work. He's not working. There's drugs. Did he get fired? I didn't get it. So subconsciously, I had to create a different situation. In order for me to get what was going on. So I was trying to set up to communicate with a literary agent that I was working with at the time, who was great about communications, usually. Like she'd get back to me within 24, 48 hours. A week went by and I hadn't heard from her. Okay, that got my attention, right? Two people, different walks of life, kind of doing the same thing, right? But because these are blind spots, let's focus on the projection first. What are they doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what were they doing? They weren't showing up. They weren't doing what they said they would do. They weren't keeping their agreements. They weren't keeping their word. So therefore, they were out of integrity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Easy to see over there. Turn that mirror around. You know, the mirror that we flash in front of it, like we shove in front of somebody's faces. You do this, right? Turn that around. How do I do that? It took me a few days because I
Mm-hmm.
was looking in the wrong place. I was looking in relationship to others. Am I keeping my agreement? Yeah. Am I showing up in that relationship? Yes. Am I doing what I said I would do? Yes. And then it hit me in relationship to my writing. How many times had I said to myself, I'm going to finish that chapter by such and such a date? Did I do
Mm-hmm.
it? No. I was doing other important stuff. I was doing retreats, traveling, whatever, coaching, whatever. But I wasn't showing up for my writing. I wasn't keeping my agreement with myself. Nobody else knew about this in relationship to my writing. And all I had to do was bring consciousness to it, right? I didn't have to finish that book. I could say, you know what? I'm not going to finish it. Or I could say to myself, you know what? Extend the deadline. Another 60 days, another 90 days, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I was doing none of that. I wasn't showing up and I was like trying to sweep it away, sweep it under the rug. But not the minute, within the hour, and that part I'm not exaggerating, within the hour of me having that insight and making that choice about my writing, they both called.
Yeah,
So
that's funny.
no longer did I need to create external drama in my
Yeah,
life to face myself and make a choice. You know, dude, right or not, but make a choice.
yeah. You're bringing whatever was happening subconsciously, you make it brought it to the conscience, um, your conscious. So when you're in relationships, right, will you say that, like, if you talk about blind spots and things like that, and you're in relationships, the people that are in your world or closest to you, or maybe pop in or pop out, however it goes, there are reflections of you. And if it's something happening that's not really in alignment,
Yeah,
you can kind of mirror those relationships and really look at yourself and seeing what's not working and what's actually happening with you.
exactly, exactly. And
With
then, you know,
family too, yeah.
yeah, everybody. And of course, who's going to get us the most? Those who are closest to us, you know, family, siblings, lovers, those are the ones that get us the most. But if we approach it with this, rather than pointing the finger and making wrong and you do this, you always do that, you never do this, right? That's not going to do anybody any good. The more that we point the finger, the other person just shuts down and defends and points the finger right back. But that's not true. And you do that, and you also do that, right? And then it becomes an argument and a fight and a power struggle. If we, and with clear boundaries, right, if somebody's behavior is doing something that is impacting us, of course we speak up, but we do it in a different way, right? Rather than pointing the finger, like, you don't care about me, you only care about yourself, or you only care about your schedule, not mine, right? That's only going to lead to argument. So
Mm-hmm.
frame it in the way, when you do X, I feel Y,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, own it. Like, what is it that's really going on? Like, say that I have an ongoing lunch with Mary, and Mary's always late. Um, And rather, what we end up doing is sitting there waiting for Mary. It's like, shit, she is so selfish and she never shows up on time. She only cares about her own schedule. And then Mary shows up and we put on a fake smile,
Mhm.
because we hate confrontation. And then the sarcasm starts dripping out through the side of our,
Yeah.
the covert jabs. um, but that's not going to help, right? But so we have to own that it's our stuff. Like maybe you have lunch with Mary. Mary shows up late, and you're like, "Great, I have 20 minutes. Let me return that phone call, catch up on the news." Right? There's so many ways to respond to Mary's lateness. Why does it bother me so much? And it doesn't excuse her lateness. That's a different conversation. But if I scratch under the surface of Mary's lateness and of my feelings to Mary's lateness, it's like I'm probably going to look something like, I'm not feeling valued. I'm not feeling respected. I'm not feeling worthy. And those feelings are way older than my lunches with Mary. And that's where I have, once I do that work and ask myself what is really going on, what am I feeling here? Underneath the anger about her lateness or those deeper feelings, then I can do something about them.
Mhm.
And once I heal the what's underneath it, the feeling not good enough, feeling not respected, feeling not worthy, then I'm free. Mary can show up late, anybody can show up late, and I can make some clear choices. Like say to Mary, Mary, I love our friendship and I love our weekly lunches, but I gotta tell you, when you show up late, I don't feel valued. I
Mhm.
don't feel like my time is being valued, and I don't like those feelings. Can we do this a different way? Right? And I'm owning that it's my stuff. I'm not exonerating her. I'm bringing it up for discussion, and then I can make a choice. If Mary continues showing up late, then I can make a choice about that because Mary's obviously not valuing my request and my
Yeah.
preference.
Yeah. That's that's some transformation right there, within yourself, and then it depends on the relationship that too as well. Um, and you know, it's a practice, right? The whole transformation thing. And how do people sustain their transformation to themselves and relationships when it does begin to transform?
I mean, I think some of this stuff is irreversible. I really do. Once we get to the core, right, to the core of the stuff, the misunderstanding, the lie that we're not worthy, that we don't deserve respect, that we don't deserve to be loved, right? That misunderstanding. There are ways with practices like breathwork that once it clears permanently. There may still be some behavioral habits, just because we've been doing things for a certain way all our lives. So it might take a while for the behavior to catch up with the new identity. So part of it is becoming really present, right? And rather than going through life distracting ourselves and running away from looking at ourselves and why we do the things we do, like become present, like observe yourself going through life. Are you recoiling when somebody does or says something? Are you feeling anxious when somebody does or says something? What is that? Are you feeling reactive when somebody does or says something? What did that trigger? And rather than reacting, sit with it and ask yourself, what's really going on here? What am I feeling? And what's
Hmm.
underneath it? Right? What's underneath the anger? What's underneath the defensiveness? Because it's always going to be less than we thought it was.
Yeah.
It feels scary because it's scary to that young little mind, right? Who was told that they were lazy or that they weren't smart enough or they weren't good enough, whatever they were told, and we suppress that stuff, but it's been growing under the surface and becoming much bigger than it actually is.
Yeah. Much bigger. Deal with it. Deal with it.
It's so worth it to deal with it. So worth it.
It is, because what I find is when you deal with it, there's freedom that
Yes.
that comes.
Yes.
Yeah, and dealing with it and bringing freedom actually gives you access to more things in your life, and it's you talk about your soul power.
Yeah.
um, that I think. Um,
Yes, sir. There's freedom and there's power in that, in dealing
yeah,
with it.
freedom and power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm struggling because I want to continue, but we're, we're
Oh,
at an
yes.
hour.
Look at the time. I hadn't noticed either.
Um, so, so we're going to wrap up because it is an hour, and I know how our audience, it's about this time when it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's time to move and watch something else or whatever they're doing, or listen to something else, YouTube and podcasts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious to know, like, I mean, you're a transformational coach. You do one-on-one coaching and all things like that. Yes,
Yes, I do
yeah,
individual
you
one-on-one work, and I also do retreats, group
you
work.
do retreats. Like in all of your transformation, what was like the biggest thing that you've gotten
Mm.
um, since like just through your journey to where you are
Oh,
now?
well, there are two constants. I do a lot of different retreats on different themes: relationships, conscious relationships, relationships that have a chance of working, personal empowerment. I work with women specifically about women's empowerment, talk
Mhm.
about life purpose. Constant. There are two constants to every one of those retreats. One of them is understanding the ego mind. Because if, to me, there's no way around it. If you want to be free, if you want to be in your power, if you want to have a relationship that have a chance of working, if you want to have a life that is filled with meaning and with purpose, you've got to understand. I don't see a way around that, understanding the ego and how it works. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
confusion about that, right? We think ego means arrogance, inflated sense of self. And it does, but it means a whole lot more than that, right? So all that defensiveness, the reactivity, that all goes back to the ego. And in the previous book, Awakening the Soul Power, I spent probably the first fifth of the book, quarter of the book, explaining and talking, getting into the ego. So it's there, it's out there, or come to any of my retreats, and you'll figure that out. And then the second question is breathwork. Like, that's the other constant, because all that unhealed stuff, all that traumatic stuff, all those misunderstandings that we picked up along the way, they get cleared, they get healed, and I've witnessed it countless times. And I know it's hard to believe that just by breathing, that stuff can happen. And it's a particular style of breathing. You breathe for about an hour and a half, and amazing stuff happens. Um, and I can't argue with the results. It works.
Mhm.
Lives change.
Life change. Oh man, Christian. First of all, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for being like just extraordinary and within this conversation. You've given away a lot of powerful tools that people just from the conversation could take and use in their lives. But I believe, and I've never been, but I believe you would have a powerful retreat um, and some powerful books, which I'm already ordering. But um, how do people get in touch with you if they want to come to retreat or get books from you?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that, and thank you for having me on the show, Michael, and thank you for having the show. I loved the conversation. I love the back and forth. I love the depth of your questions and your own experiences and your humility in sharing some of your own personal experiences. I really appreciate that. And to me, that's leadership, right? That's authentic leadership. Um, in terms of how to reach me, probably my website's the best way to do that. From there, they can access my email or my social media. The website is soulfulpower.com. SOULFULPOWER.com. And I look forward to hearing from them, and I look forward to staying connected with you.
I do appreciate it. Yeah, likewise. And man, this has been extraordinary. It's been I didn't expect this kind of emotion to play out in this conversation, but I'm glad it did because these are kind of conversations that really make a difference and can begin somebody's journey on their transformative journey themselves. So, again, I want to say thank you for being on the podcast. And we do have the question for people that are watching on YouTube. We talked about playing small in the beginning of the podcast, and like where in your life where you're playing small and you want to make that shift. And so, just what's the bold step that you're going to take to really make that shift? And if you don't know, I believe his retreat may be a good answer. So do that, leave it in the comments. And again, Christian, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael.
And as we always say, let's make thriving our new normal, and we'll talk soon.